right? You've got some music going, pumping up. You got somebody counting down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! And they're like screaming, yeah, cowbells, ding, 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 ding. Episode 945 of Diz Runs Radio is a quick tip episode, best of-ish edition. Today's quick tip, strategic pacing at the start of a race. So today, taking a little trip back in time, several years back, actually, back to an episode that originally aired in October of 2016. So not quite 5 years ago, but getting close to 5 years ago. This was originally episode 325, and it was the third part of a three-part series talking about pace and various aspects of pace, training pace, race pace, yada, yada, yada. But I want to highlight this episode today, which again was episode 325. If you want to hit the whole series, it's episode 319, 322, 325. Check them out as you're so inclined. Obviously, dizruns.com/ any of those numbers will take you back to the blog post, and you can listen to it there, or you can scroll far enough back in your podcasting app and find each of those three episodes. But the reason I want to focus on what was episode 325, talking about pacing during your race, specifically at the start of a race, is because hopefully, at least if you want to be, hopefully we're getting back to racing season. I know several folks have already run races this spring as we're kind of coming out, again, hopefully, fingers crossed, once and for all, coming out of the pandemic and getting back to races and other areas of life, being back to a little bit kind of pre-COVID-19 situation. But if you haven't run a race in a year or so, it's easy to forget a few things. One might argue it's easy to forget your shoes. That's another topic for another day. But it's easy to forget some of the strategic pieces, some of the things that maybe you take for granted when you've been racing at a somewhat regular interval, and then you've been off, no racing for 6 months, 8 months, a year, 15 months, whatever the case might be. So I thought it was an appropriate time to revisit today's episode, because when it comes to races, I think for the most part, like if you're just running a race for fun, then today probably isn't something that you need a reminder of. Because if you're just running a race for fun, maybe you're running it with some friends, you're just out there cruising, no real time goals, then you just kind of cruise, right? Like, it's not a big deal. You're not trying to hammer certain splits. You don't have a certain finish time in mind that you're aiming for. Or maybe you're just trying to, again, you're just out there cruising. But if you have a specific goal, and maybe it is to finish this distance for the first time, maybe it's a time goal, whatever the case might be. But if you have a specific goal, how you start the race matters. And it's a mistake that I've made in the past, more times than I care to admit. The most glaring example was my first marathon. I've told the story before, but for those that haven't heard it, the quick version is that my goal was to run my first marathon, which I was woefully ill-prepared for. Again, that's another story for another day. But woefully ill-prepared for. But the goal was, not knowing any better, I think I can do it in 4 hours, which, if you don't know the numbers, that works out to be about a 9:06, 9:07 per mile pace. So I, get to the start line, comfortable. Yeah, 4 hours. I think I got this, got it in the bag. Running the first mile, everything feels good. And then I kind of came to this section of the course, which was about a mile and a half in, which is probably the worst place on the course to have like a fan tunnel. Like, it kind of, the course congested down, so you got runners a lot more close together. And it was the Walt Disney World Marathon, so there was lots of runners anyway, and then lots of spectators just lining this narrow path, everybody cheering, clapping, runners going by. And I thought that I'd slowed down to enjoy it. Turns out I was running about a 7:15 pace, when my first mile was right about where I needed to be. It was about 9-minute pace, like feeling good. Picked up my pace by way too much for not for a long section, but long enough that, I don't know. I don't think that screwed up my race. My lack of training did. But just trying to illustrate the fact that if I would have been more focused on starting the race strategically, keeping an eye on my pace strategically, maybe I would have made it another mile before I blew up at that particular race. But it's happened to me in other races as well. Other races where I have been well-trained. And you just can get into a situation where if you're not being careful, if you're not really keeping an eye on your pace for the first few miles, you can end up going way too fast, per your goal, which can get you in trouble for the longer distance races. Of course, half marathons, ultras. If you start too hot, boy, it's going to be a hard time holding on to it. And arguably, the same rules apply for shorter races as well. Not arguably, literally. The same rules apply, although you have maybe a better chance of holding it together if you start a little too fast in a 5K than if you start a little too fast in a 50K. But, it all depends. It's all relative. Moral of the story, though, is that this can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter how many races you've run, whether you're brand new, whether you're a seasoned vet. Starting too fast is something that is always a risk, and it can get you in trouble towards the end of the race. So how can it happen? How does it happen when you again, whether you know better or not, how do you go to running maybe a minute per mile, maybe even more than that, faster than your goal pace for the race in the first couple miles of a marathon or a half marathon or any type of event? Well, I think there's a couple of factors that are usually at play. And, like any good multifactorial situation, they combine to where the sum is greater than the parts, right? But during these races, especially a big race, like in my instance, a Disney marathon, the starting line tends to be a pretty happening place. And even for some of the smaller races, they might have some music there. Usually there's, obviously, all the runners are there. Maybe there's some spectators. So even your local 5Ks, there might be some stuff going on at the starting line. But that whole situation can get things going, right? You've got some music going, pumping up. You got somebody counting down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! And they're like screaming, yeah, cowbells, ding, 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 ding. And all the spectators are cheering. I mean, if that's not a recipe to maybe kind of shoot out of the gate, I don't know what is. And then you've got all these other runners around you, some of which are falling victim to the excitement, and they're going out too fast. Some of which aren't, but their pace, their fitness is going to be faster than your goals, right? Unless you're right up there at the very front, there's always going to be people that are faster than you, which is not a problem. That's not better or worse. It's just a fact. But they're going out, and you're like, oh, I feel good, and maybe you kind of tuck in behind them, and all of a sudden they're running their strategic, smart, reserved start of the race is too fast for you at the start of the race, but you're just tucking in. It's other runners, no big deal. Spectators, crowds, like all of the things going on. Then again, you add the bigger races, maybe there's fireworks. Disney races have fireworks for each starting wave. So even if you're not, in the first corral, you're getting fireworks to start. And again, fireworks, festivities, cheering, the whole 9 yards can be pretty easy to go out too fast. And again, it doesn't matter whether you've done it before, whether you have never run a race before, whether you know that you've gone out too fast at races before, and so you're going into it going, all right, this race, I'm going to lock it in, keep it nice and steady. You can still end up going too fast. I know because I've done it. I know because I've coached folks that have done it. I know because I've commiserated with folks on race day that have done it, in person. I've commiserated with folks on social media. Like, it happens. So what's the maybe not surefire way to prevent it, but what is kind of the idea to try to help mitigate that risk, how to start your race intelligently? I think the biggest thing you can do is start with a script in mind, and then, of course, stick to the script, right? Having a plan in place doesn't matter if you don't stick to the plan. But one thing I always do with the people I'm coaching, certainly I try to do it for myself as well, especially if I have a goal for the race, is to kind of script out the first mile at least, and if it's a longer race, probably 5K. And I don't try to script it perfectly. Like, I'm not worried about exact second splits and like exactly whether it's a 9-minute pace or 10-minute pace or 10:12 or 9:47. Like, I'm not that detail focused on it. But say my goal, all right, my goal for my first race. If I had this to do over again, in addition to training at least decently for my first marathon, my script for the start of the race would have been something like this. So my overall goal, my overall finish time is to try to finish at a 9:07 pace, right? So I could finish in 4 hours. So my script for the first 5K or so of the race would be to aim to run somewhere between like 9:15 and 9:30, maybe even 9:30 to 9:45. So potentially, it would have been to start the first mile at the slowest end of that range, so like 9:45, then run the second mile at like 9:35, then run the third mile at like 9:30, maybe even to 9:25, something like that. Just kind of gradually easing into the race, getting a little bit faster as we go. And then after the excitement of the starting line wears off, after the excitement of all the other runners and the spectators and the people that are definitely faster than me, they're gone. They're up in front. I gave them the right of way. Then at about the 5K mark, settle in at my goal pace, right? Try to drop it down to about that 9:05 to 9:10 range and just kind of cruise there for a while. At that point, I wouldn't have a detailed plan anymore. That's about where I want to be. I started off intelligently and then settle in. Now, you might be saying, but Diz, if the goal is to run 9:05, 9:06, 9:07, something like that, why are you setting the target for 9:45, 9:35, 9:30 for your first 3 miles? Because you don't have to be a math whiz to know that that's setting myself up to be slower than I need to be. Well, I'm doing that because the second thing of a good strategic, smart start to a race, as far as I'm concerned, is to give yourself a buffer. Right? So odds are, even if I'm trying to fight the good fight and stay neutral and not be influenced by the excitement, by the environment, by the other runners, I am also only human. And I'm probably going to get caught up in the moment a little bit. So if I set my target at 9:45 and I end up going off a bit hot and running 9:25, well, hey, I'm still slower. I'm still reserved from my optimal goal pace. Yeah, it might be a little faster than I wanted to, but I have some buffer. I have some room for error instead of going, aiming like, all right, I'm going to aim for that 9:06, 9:07 pace and then running 20 seconds faster than that, running 8:45 for the first mile. That has the potential to get me into more trouble than running 9:25 when my goal was to run 9:45. So I give myself some wiggle room, especially in that first mile, so that if I do get a little bit excited, get a little bit hyped, maybe my legs are just feeling fantastic because I actually tapered, so I'm not running on tired legs. Like, oh, wow, my legs are moving. Well, I decrease my chances of going out too hot by giving myself that buffer zone. Then the third thing I would do, I've got 2 more things. The third thing I do, keep a better eye on my watch. Like I said, I was kind of keeping an eye on my watch for the first mile. I was where I needed to be at that Disney race. But then I got in this tunnel of spectators screaming, loud, other runners, and I just kind of like soaked in the moment, which is a good thing to do. I mean, I think it's good to be in the moment, but getting in the moment also made me pick up my pace by 2 minutes per mile, which was not ideal. So keeping an eye on your watch, and with technology, with where it's at today, maybe that even means setting some type of pace alert so that not that you can't go too fast, but so that you at least get a buzz or a vibration or a beep or something that says, hey, whoa, are you sure you want to be going this fast? And again, with some of these watches these days that are super fancy, that I'm sure mine could do it, but I don't know how because I'm not that worried about all the tech and bells and whistles. But you can probably even set it up to have a pace alert for the first 5K. And then after that, you don't have the pace alert anymore. So you could set it up to buzz if you get too fast. If you got into that 9:05 or 8:45 or 8:30 range, wherever your cutoff would be. But then once you settle into the race, you're good to go. It won't buzz anymore. That's where you can chip away. You can make up that time that you gave back at the beginning. Once you've settled into the race, once the excitement wears off, it's more controlled, and you won't have to worry about your watch buzzing the whole way. But keeping an eye on your watch. Kind of important when you're trying to stick to a certain pace for a certain segment of the race. And then last but not least, and at some races this isn't a problem, some races it definitely is, line up appropriately. If it's a big race where they have multiple corrals, you probably are assigned a corral based on your running experience, finish times in past races, anticipated finish time in this race. Okay? Some races are more strict in that than others, but you probably have some type of assignment. We've all heard stories. Some of us are guilty of this as well. No judgment, but it's happened. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. where folks that are assigned, maybe the F or G corral, if we're going alphabetical order, A being the fastest corral and whatever, F, G, H, O, whatever, but they're assigned the F or the G corral, but they sneak their way in or accidentally find themselves in corral B. If that happens, that means you're around runners that are probably expected to be running quite a bit faster in the race than you are, which makes it even more likely that you're going to get swept up into the pace of the faster runners. And it also means that you're kind of potentially, and again, quite possibly unintentionally, being that bottleneck, being that runner that isn't where they should be. And that does create tripping hazards. It creates problems when you have a bunch of people that are faster. Sometimes this happens intentionally. Hopefully you've never done that, but it's happened to me unintentionally for sure. So if you have in any race, and even if they don't have corrals, but if it's a small local 5K and you know that you're not going to be the fastest person there that day, you're not racing to win the race, don't try to line up right on the start line, right? Give yourself 10 feet back and then start the race when you get to the start line, okay? So line up appropriately. That's just going to put you in an area of runners that are more likely to be at your pace, which is going to help to decrease the risk of going out too fast. All right. Like I said earlier, the risk of going out too fast, the risk of starting too hot, it never goes away completely. But if you do some of these things, if you script your start and stick to it, give yourself a little wiggle room, keep an eye on your watch, and then line up appropriately, you can definitely decrease the risk of doing it, of going out too fast. And then hopefully that sets you up to not only be able to finish, not only avoid blowing up in your race, but hopefully allowing you to finish strong. And if your fitness is there, your training is there, even though you gave away maybe a minute in the first 3 miles by running a little bit slower than your goal pace, maybe even 2 minutes, you can finish faster, finish strong, not fade down the stretch, and you'll more than make up that time. Right? No guarantees, but it's the best. It's a good option. It's a good strategy to go for. But it can never be eliminated. That risk can never be eliminated. So do your best, and as you're getting back into races this year, something to keep in mind about how to pace the start of your race, so that hopefully you'll hit your goal marks and have a good, first handful of races back after the pandemic. So those are my thoughts on starting strategically on race day when it comes to your pace. What did I miss? What areas have you struggled with? Have you had a disaster blow up like I did? All thoughts and feedbacks on this episode would be welcome at DizRuns on Twitter, at DizRuns on Instagram. You can also send an email to dizruns@gmail.com. You can head over to the show notes for today, which are more or less copy and pasted from the original episode. But today's show notes, dizruns.com/945. We also have the links back to the original episode and the other 2 pace series episodes we talked about. The first one being about monitoring your pace during a race, how much do you want to do that, and also how to improve your pace, getting faster. So if you want to check those ones out, that's episode 319 and 322. Links also in today's episode. And you can also leave a comment on the YouTubes, because the quick tips are now on the YouTubes. So check it out there if you're so inclined. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, I guess watching it on YouTube, but it's just a static image, so you're not really watching anything. But thanks. Cheers. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know you found us over on YouTube. So if you're enjoying them on YouTube, let us know that too, so we make sure to keep on keeping on, keep putting in the effort to get them up over there. But thoughts on or feedbacks or stories, definitely stories. If you have a story, I'd love to hear it about starting too fast and how that worked out for you, and what you do to prevent yourself from going out too fast as well. Hit me up, let me know. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. One last time, if you want to get in the giveaway, get in the giveaway. DizRuns.com/giveaway is the place to do it. Get a chance to work with me for free, and hopefully that would be enticing. If not, then I guess don't get in the giveaway. But if you're so inclined, get in the giveaway, get some free coaching, hopefully, if the random number generator smiles down upon you. And with that, thanks for listening, y'all. If you enjoyed this one, hit that share button. But otherwise, be well, take good care. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk soon, all right? See you.